A young elf risks everything for a forgotten truth. Elara knows entering the forbidden whispering vault means exile, but she sees a silent decay creeping through her homeland, a fading magic the elders refuse to acknowledge. She is searching for the 22 ancient codes, legendary messages said to be hidden within Elven artifacts, believing they hold the key to salvation. By the end of this journey, you will understand how a single act of defiance can unveil a secret powerful enough to restore an entire world. Wherever you are listening from, and whatever the local time is for you right now, I would love to know, so feel free to share that in the comments. What would you risk to uncover a hidden truth that could save your home? Her fingers barely grazed the cold, smooth surface of the moonstone lens. A shock of warmth shot up her arm as the artifact erupted in a silent, brilliant flare. Light coalesced in the air, weaving a complex, shimmering pattern onto the vault wall. It was a language of pure geometry and magic, a secret made visible for the first time in centuries. This was it, the first of the 22 ancient codes, but her triumph was instantly cut short by a low, resonant hum that began to pulse through the stone floor. The silent alarm had been triggered. Footsteps, swift and heavy, echoed from the corridor outside. She had only heartbeats to decide: leave the discovery and run, or risk capture to preserve it. Her eyes darted from the mesmerizing pattern to the entrance, then back. She couldn't let it vanish. Fumbling in her satchel, she pulled out a piece of supple bark and a charcoal stylus. Her hand moved in a frantic dance, tracing the intricate lines of light as the footsteps grew louder. The final line was sketched just as the vault door began to groan open. She shoved the bark into her tunic and melted into the deeper shadows, her heart hammering against the stolen secret. Elara was no longer just a curious scholar. She was a fugitive, marked by her own people for uncovering a truth they had sworn to forget. With the first code seared into her memory and its physical copy safely hidden, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had to find someone who could help her decipher the message before the Vault Guardians found her. The Whispering Woods offered little comfort to a fugitive. Every rustling leaf sounded like a pursuing guardian. Every shadow seemed to hold a watchful eye. With the stolen sketch pressed against her chest, Elara had only one desperate destination in mind. She pushed deeper into the wood's untamed heart, to a dwelling spoken of only in whispers, the home of Kalin. Once the royal cartographer, his name was now a warning against challenging the elders. His exile was a stark reminder of the price for asking the wrong questions. She found his home not as a hovel, but as a structure woven into the roots of an ancient, gnarled tree, its windows dark and unwelcoming. When he opened the door, his face was a mask of cold suspicion. He refused her before she could even finish her plea, his voice sharp with old wounds. The authorities that cast him out were not a force he would ever defy again. But as he moved to shut the door, Elara did the only thing she could. She unfolded the piece of bark, holding the shimmering, impossible geometry of the first ancient code into the dim light. Kalen's breath caught. His scholarly instincts, long suppressed by bitterness, flared to life. The sheer complexity of the pattern was a siren's call he couldn't ignore. Reluctantly, he stepped aside, granting her shelter for a single night. a decision that tied his fragile safety directly to her treason. Inside, surrounded by half-finished maps and dusty scrolls, a tense silence hung between them. Elara's passion was a raw, undeniable force, challenging the walls he had built around himself. He wrestled with a deep desire for redemption, for a chance to prove his life's work had meaning, against the chilling fear of what more the elders would take from him. Finally, his curiosity overpowered his caution. He took the sketch to his work table, his long fingers tracing the lines with a reverence he thought he had lost. He muttered about harmonic alignments and foundational syntax, his eyes alight with a fire Elara had never seen in the sterile halls of the main archives. Then he stopped, his finger hovering over a specific, repeating symbol. "This is not just a message," he whispered, his voice filled with a mix of awe and dread. "It is a map. This cluster here, this sigil of intertwined roots and a fallen star, it points to a specific place, the Sunken Grove. Legends say another artifact rests there, submerged and forgotten." His involvement was now absolute. If they were discovered, his exile would become a permanent imprisonment. But as he looked from the cryptic code to Elara's determined face, he knew that some truths were worth any risk. The journey to the Sunken Grove was a slow descent into a world of clinging mist and treacherous ground. Kalin moved with a cartographer's precision, testing each soggy patch of earth before placing his full weight, his eyes constantly scanning the dense, vine-choked canopy. Lyra, buzzing with the energy of their discovery, found his caution maddening. She saw a direct path and wanted to take it, while he charted a winding, safer route, his patience a stark contrast to her urgency. More than once, her boots sank into what appeared to be solid ground, only to find herself knee-deep in cold, murky water, the hidden eyes of territorial swamp lurkers glinting from the shadows. The air itself was thick and heavy, smelling of decay and stagnant magic. When they finally reached the heart of the grove, the sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and deeply frustrating. There, half submerged in a dark, algae-scummed pool, stood a moss-covered obelisk of pure white stone. The second ancient code was indeed carved into its surface, but a large portion of the intricate script was hidden beneath the murky water, distorted by ripples and clinging aquatic plants. Kalin immediately began assessing the situation from the safety of the bank, muttering about structural integrity and potential enchantments woven into the stone itself. He warned that such artifacts were rarely left unguarded, and a single misstep could trigger a magical defense. Elara, however, saw the fading light and felt the pressing danger of their pursuit. While Kalin was still calculating the angle of the sun for better visibility, she made a decision. She would not let the water hide their answer. Trusting him to watch for any shift in the obelisk's energy or approaching creatures, she carefully waded into the surprisingly cold pool. The murky water swirled around her waist as she reached the stone, her fingers gently brushing away slime and tendrils of moss from the carved lines. With Kalin guiding her from the shore, calling out which sections to clear next, they worked in tandem. Her bravery allowed him to see the full pattern, and his meticulous eye ensured no detail was missed. As the last of the obscuring growth was pulled away, the second code was revealed in its entirety, a complex web of symbols that pulsed with a faint, internal light. But their triumph was short-lived. A low, guttural growl rumbled through the grove, a sound that vibrated in their bones. From the deeper shadows of the swamp, a massive reptilian beast with shimmering, corrosive saliva dripping from its jaws emerged. Their activity had drawn a hunter. With the creature now stalking them, their only hope lay in the new clue they had just uncovered. Kalen's eyes raced over the completed code, his mind piecing together the geographic markers. The message was clear. The next destination was a place of even greater peril, a range of jagged mountains where the very earth was known to sing with volatile power. The path forward led to the crystal peaks. The jagged slopes of the crystal peaks bit into their hands with every desperate climb. This was not a mountain of simple stone, but a treacherous lattice of protruding gemstones and unstable mineral formations that sang with a low, dangerous hum. Using the combined clues from the first two codes, Kalin directed them toward a specific rock face that seemed to shimmer with a faint, almost imperceptible light. He explained that the entrance wasn't a physical door, but a point of harmonic resonance. Guided by Elara's more attuned senses, they found the spot and, working together, hummed the precise sequence of notes the patterns had revealed. The very air before them shimmered and parted, unveiling a narrow, dark opening into the mountain itself. Inside, the cave was a breathtaking cavern of glittering pillars, but the beauty was a deadly illusion. The floor was a web of cracks, and the constant low hum made the entire structure vibrate. With every careful step, tiny crystal shards rained down from the ceiling. At the center of the cavern, suspended in midair, was a perfectly spherical orb of clear crystal, pulsing with a soft, internal light. This was the third artifact. Remembering the musical key to the entrance, Lyra knew they had to use sound again. She closed her eyes, focusing her magical sensitivity on the orb, and began to hum a more complex melody derived from the codes. Kalin, meanwhile, used his knowledge of geology to brace himself against what looked like the most stable pillar, his eyes scanning the ceiling for any sign of major structural failure. As Elara's voice found the correct sequence of notes, the orb reacted violently. It flared with brilliant light, and a new, intricate code was projected onto the cavern wall. But the energy required to activate it sent a powerful tremor through the cave. A large crack shot across the ceiling directly above them. Kalin shouted a warning, shoving Elara away from a falling hail of crystalline debris as she scrambled to memorize the final lines of the projected message. They had the third code, but the price was immediate. With a thunderous roar, a section of the entrance tunnel collapsed, sealing them inside with only one unknown way forward. They found a narrow fissure at the rear of the cavern, a tight squeeze that led them out onto a precarious ledge high on the mountainside. Catching their breath, they looked down toward the distant tree line. Their hearts sank. There, moving with deliberate purpose along a lower ridge, was a distinct patrol of vault guardians, their polished armor glinting in the sun. The cave-in had not just trapped them, it had acted as a beacon, signaling their exact location. They were no longer just fugitives fleeing a crime. They were prey being actively hunted. Their path was clear. They had to move faster than ever before and find a sanctuary where they could decipher the three codes they now possessed without being found. The world narrowed to a single, winding path down into a secluded valley, a hidden basin where the air was still and the very wind seemed to hold its breath. Following the third code's poetic clue about one who listens to the wind, they found not a grand sage, but an ancient elf named Lyra. Her home, a simple cottage surrounded by whispering grasses. Her eyes, old and deeply weary, held a knowledge that went far beyond dusty scrolls. She recognized the codes they had gathered, not with excitement, but with a heavy sigh of resignation. She confirmed their deepest hope and their greatest fear. The 22 ancient codes were not a historical record. They were a living, breathing spell, a protective latticework of magic designed to rejuvenate the entire land, and they were failing because they had been deliberately fractured. The silence of the elders, the aggressive pursuit by the guardians, it all made a terrible new sense. A powerful faction within the Elven Council itself, she revealed, was actively working to prevent the codes from ever being assembled. Their control over the people depended on a slowly dying world, a crisis only they claimed to manage. Lyra refused to say more. Awakening such power, she warned, was not a gentle act of restoration. It would be a storm, upending the fragile order they all clung to, and she had seen enough storms in her long life. The risk of unleashing this magic was far too great. But Elara would not accept this. With a raw, desperate honesty that surprised even Kalin, she did not argue with logic. She spoke of a vision that had haunted her since childhood, a recurring dream of her homeland, not just faded, but utterly desolate, a silent, gray wasteland where nothing grew and no birds sang. It was this profound emptiness, this future of absolute loss, that had driven her into the Forbidden Vault. The risk of trying might be great, she pleaded, but the cost of doing nothing was a guarantee of that desolation. Her personal truth, laid bare in that quiet valley, finally cracked Lyra's resolve. The Hermit saw in Elara's passion the same fire that had once burned in her own heart, long ago extinguished by fear. With a solemn nod, Lyra provided them with a delicate, hand-drawn map, pointing to the next location, the Misty Falls, but the gift came with a grave warning. The Council's opposition was not merely a matter of law enforcement. They were now being hunted by Shadow Watchers, covert agents of the faction who operated with absolute deniability. Their mission had just become exponentially more dangerous. It was no longer a race against capture, but a conspiracy they had to expose. Armed with the new map and a chilling understanding of the true enemy, they left the peaceful valley behind, their steps now heavy with the knowledge that the greatest threats might not be in the wilds ahead, but in the very halls of power they once called home. The path now led toward the thunderous roar, an ever-shifting spray of the Misty Falls. The thunderous roar of the Misty Falls was a constant, deafening presence that soaked them to the bone. They searched for hours, scanning every wet rock and hidden crevice, but found no carved stone or hidden artifact. It was Kalin, his cartographer's eye, analyzing the angle of the sun as it dipped toward the horizon, who first noticed the anomaly. A single, brilliant beam of golden light pierced the heavy spray, and for just a few precious minutes, it projected a complex, shimmering pattern onto the curtain of water itself. The fourth code was not an object to be found, but an event to be witnessed, a fleeting secret written in light and mist. They had one chance each day to see it, and the window was closing fast. Elara knew immediately that simple observation was not enough. The pattern was too intricate, its details shifting with the moving water. They needed to capture it. Drawing deeply on her remaining magical strength, she began to weave a delicate enchantment, a net of energy designed to freeze the light in place long enough for Kalin to sketch it. The effort was immense. As her hands moved, tracing glowing symbols in the air, the vibrant colors of her magic began to dim and falter. She pushed through the draining sensation, holding the intricate web steady until Kalin made the final stroke on his parchment. The moment the code was secured, the enchantment shattered. Elara staggered, her legs buckling beneath her, completely spent. The roar of the water seemed to grow louder, more menacing. Kalin moved without hesitation. He caught her, his arm a firm support around her waist, and pulled her back from the slick, treacherous edge of the pool. His usual caution was replaced by a fierce, protective focus. He guided her steps over the unstable, moss-covered rocks, his eyes constantly scanning the surrounding forest for any sign of the patrols they knew were nearby. His transformation was complete. He was no longer a reluctant exile, but a committed guardian, his scholarly mind now fully aligned with their desperate cause. As Elara slowly recovered her strength, hunched over and breathing deeply, they pieced together the meaning of the new pattern. This code was fundamentally different. It spoke of pure water and refracted light, an elemental force. It was now clear the artifacts were not random treasures. They were anchors, each one tied to a core element of the natural world, and they had to gather them all to reactivate the protective lattice. The quest was exponentially larger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Their next destination, deciphered from the water script, was a place of searing heat and primal earth fire, a deep scar in the land known as the Ember-Kasm. The oppressive heat of the Ember-Kasm hit them like a physical wall, the air shimmering over rivers of molten rock. At the chasm's heart, resting on a pedestal of black obsidian, sat a tablet forged from solidified magma, its surface glowing with the fifth code. But between them and their goal stood a being of living flame, its form shifting and dancing in the superheated air. It did not attack, but instead issued a resonant, crackling challenge. It demanded a duel of wits, a test of their understanding of the world's deepest truths. There would be no battle of spells or strength here, only a contest of minds where a single wrong answer would see them sealed within the chasm forever. The first riddle echoed in their thoughts. I devour wood, stone, and steel, yet I am quenched by a simple breath. I give warmth and light, but leave only ash in my wake. What am I? Kalen's mind, so adept at maps and mechanics, seized on the literal components. He began muttering about oxidation rates and combustible materials, his logic circling the answer, but failing to grasp its core. Lyra, feeling the primal energy of the place, saw the truth not as a chemical process, but as an elemental force. Fire, she answered, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. The spirit pulsed with approval, but the second riddle was more abstract. I am sought by many, but held by none. I can crown a king or bury a civilization. I am the parent of both patience and despair. What am I? This time, Elara's intuition failed her. She thought of power, of love, of magic itself, but each guess felt hollow. Kalin, remembering the long years of his exile and the patient work of cartography, recognized the shape of the answer. It is time, he said, the word hanging heavy in the scorched air. The final riddle was the most personal. What is the greatest sacrifice and the greatest gift one can offer for the sake of the world? Lyra immediately thought of her own exile, the home and status she had given up. Kalin thought of his safety, the quiet life he had surrendered, but as they looked at each other, a deeper understanding passed between them. It was not about what they had already lost, but what they were willing to become. Their individual selves, Elara declared, her voice blending with Kalen's as they spoke in unison, to unite for something greater. The fire spirit fell silent, its chaotic form stilling into a shape of respect. Their combined minds, intuitive and logical, had passed the test. It granted them access to the magma tablet, and as Kalin carefully transcribed the fifth code, the spirit offered them a parting gift, a single, perpetually glowing ember that pulsed with a soft, warm light. This will illuminate your path where the sun has never reached, it crackled, its voice fading as the chasm's heat seemed to lessen. Their next destination was a place of absolute darkness, a realm where their only light would be the trust they had forged in fire. Darkness had fallen like a blanket, the forest alive with the sounds of unseen creatures. They moved as quietly as they could, the glowing ember from the Ember-Kasm, their only source of light, casting long, dancing shadows between the ancient trees. The attack came without a sound. One moment the path was clear, the next they were surrounded by figures clad in deep gray, their forms blurring at the edges, making them almost indistinguishable from the night itself. These were the shadow watchers Lyra had warned them about. A blade, dark and non-reflective, flashed toward the satchel, holding their precious code sketches. Kalin moved on pure instinct, shoving Elara aside and taking the cut across his forearm. He cried out, more in shock than pain, as the satchel strap was severed. The precious parchment spilled onto the forest floor. A frantic scramble ensued. Elara dropped to her knees, grabbing for the sketches while Kalin, clutching his bleeding arm, tried to hold the watchers at bay with wild swings of his staff. He was no warrior, and they knew it. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace, their goal clearly not to kill, but to retrieve and silence. One of the watchers lunged for a sketch. In that moment of sheer panic, Elara did not think. She acted. Her hands came up, and she poured her fear and determination into a spell she had only ever practiced in secret, one the elders had deemed frivolous and unstable. A wave of distorted light erupted from her fingertips, weaving a complex illusion of multiple paths, branching away from their location and masking their true forms with the image of flickering tree trunks. The lead watcher hesitated, his head snapping from one false trail to another. That single moment of confusion was all they needed. Elara snatched the last sketch, grabbed Kalin by his uninjured arm, and pulled him off the path. They crashed through a thicket of thorny bushes, the illusion already beginning to fray, the sounds of pursuit closing in once more. They ran until their lungs burned, using the treacherous, uneven ground to their advantage, finally finding precarious shelter beneath the tangled roots of a fallen giant. In the suffocating darkness, Elara tended to Kalen's wound. The cut was deep, and his face was pale. This was no longer a theoretical danger. The Council's faction was real. Its agents were skilled, and they would stop at nothing. Her hands trembled as she bound the injury, but her mind was clearer than ever. She had a power they did not expect, and she would use it. "We need a healer," Kalin whispered, his voice tight with pain. And we need a fortress, somewhere we can study these codes without looking over our shoulders every second. Every potential ally could be a watcher in disguise, and every step forward now felt like walking into a snare. The ember's glow seemed a small, defiant thing against the immense, watchful dark pressing in around them. The forest floor was a bed of damp moss and hidden roots, each step a fresh agony for Kalin. His arm throbbed with a deep, persistent heat, a stark reminder of the Shadow Watcher's cold efficiency. They moved on, driven by little more than the faint glow of their ember and a desperate hope for refuge. It was that faint light that finally caught the attention of Fenn the healer. He found them, not they him, his form emerging from the trees as if woven from the mist itself. His sanctuary was not a building, but a grove hidden by layers of gentle, powerful magic, a pocket of tranquility where the air itself smelled of clean earth and restorative herbs. In that safe space, Fenn's skilled hands cleansed and bound Kalen's wound with poultices that cooled the fire in his flesh almost instantly. The relief was so profound, it was dizzying. For the first time in what felt like an age, they could breathe without looking over their shoulders. With their immediate danger addressed, they spread the 5 codes out on a low stone table, the complex patterns illuminated by drifting, magical globes of light. Working together in the grove's profound peace, the pieces began to click into place with startling clarity. The codes were not just a map or a history. They were a precise set of instructions, a ritual of reconnection. To reignite the land's fading heart, they would need to gather specific artifacts, each one a key, and bring them all to a single, sacred site during a rare celestial alignment. The scale of the task was breathtaking, a symphony of magic, objects, and timing that left them both awestruck and overwhelmed. Fenn listened to their quiet deductions, his expression growing graver by the moment. His sympathy for their cause was genuine, warring with a deep, protective fear for his hidden home. "You have uncovered a truth that could save us all," he admitted, his voice low. "But you carry a storm with you. If the Watchers find you here, this sanctuary will be burned to the ground." His terms were non-negotiable. They could stay only until Kalin was strong enough to travel, and not a moment longer. Faced with his ultimatum, Elara and Kaelen made a choice. They trusted him with the core of their story, holding back only the most dangerous details about the Council's conspiracy. In return for their honesty, Fenn gifted them not just healing herbs for the journey, but a crucial warning. The land's decay, he explained, has created corrupted zones where magic twists in on itself. In these places, the code's messages could be distorted, like a reflection in troubled water. Misreading a single symbol under such influence would not just lead you astray. It could unravel the spell you are trying to weave, with consequences we cannot predict. The weight of their quest grew heavier, the path ahead now fraught with both physical and perceptual danger. When they finally left the healing grove, Kalen's arm was tightly bound but functional, and their spirits were renewed by rest and a clearer purpose. Fenn's final gesture was to point toward the sky, to a place that drifted high above the corrupted lands. "Your next anchor lies there," he said, "where the air is still pure." The floating island of Ethra. They set their sights upward, toward a sanctuary in the clouds, hoping it held an artifact untouched by the rot below. Reaching the floating island of Ethra required more than flight. It demanded a symphony of effort. Elara wove the levitation spell from strands of cloud magic, described in the 5th code, while Kalin used his cartographer's mind to calculate the precise atmospheric currents that would carry them upward. The island itself was a breathtaking fragment of an older world, a disk of earth and rock adrift in the silent sky, its underside tangled with the roots of ancient, suspended trees. At its center stood the 6th artifact, a pillar holding a complex set of interlocking stone rings, each one carved with a segment of an unfinished pattern. The moment Elara touched the first ring, the entire island groaned and listed sharply to one side. The puzzle was not static. It was a balancing act with the very ground beneath their feet. Every rotation, every slight adjustment they made to align the rings, caused the island to tilt and sway in a disorienting dance. Kalin, his injured arm still tender, braced himself against the central pillar, his eyes tracking the shifting angles. He shouted instructions, his voice cutting through the creaking of strained earth, calculating which ring to turn and by how much to counteract the dangerous lean. Elara, lighter and more agile, became his hands, scrambling across the tilting stone to physically manipulate the heavy rings according to his directions. Their trust was absolute in that moment, a seamless exchange of logic and action. One misstep, one ring turned a fraction too far, and the island would have tipped them into the endless sky. With a final, coordinated twist, the last ring clicked into place. The completed pattern glowed across the stone circles, and the 6th code shimmered into view. But their success came with an immediate cost. The aligned artifact hummed with a powerful, grounding energy, and the island began a slow, inexorable descent. They had minutes, not hours. Grabbing the transcribed code, they leaped from the crumbling edge, the levitation spell slowing their fall just enough to land safely in a canopy of resilient upper branches. As they caught their breath, looking up at the floating island, now sinking toward the distant peaks, the new code's meaning settled in their minds. It spoke of a place where joy had died, where memories were etched into crumbling stone. Their path now led into the heart of a forgotten grief, to the abandoned City of Echoes. Silence was the true resident of the City of Echoes. Their footsteps, though light, seemed to boom against the crumbling, vine-choked walls, each sound swallowed and then thrown back at them as a distorted whisper. The 7th artifact was not hidden, but hung in a skeletal bell tower at the city's center, a massive bell of blackened bronze, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to drink the light. Kalin immediately saw the mechanism, a series of crystal strikers arranged around the bell, but the instructions were clear. It would only ring with a specific, forgotten melody. Elara approached it, her fingers hovering over the cold crystals. The required tune was a ghost in her own mind, a fragment of a lullaby her grandmother had hummed, a melody she had not heard since childhood. She closed her eyes, reaching for the memory, and began to play. Her first attempts were clumsy, the notes falling flat and lifeless. But then, a single, pure tone rang out, and the bell began to hum in sympathy. She found the rhythm, the sequence, and as the final note was struck, the bell told a single, deep, resonant note that did not fade. Instead, the sound wave itself solidified in the air before them, a complex, three-dimensional pattern of rippling light. The 7th code. Their triumph was instantly shattered. All around them, the echoes in the city did not die. They coalesced, From the broken stones and empty doorways, spectral forms materialized, their eyes burning with cold, ancient fury. The guardians of the city, awakened by the sacred sound, now rose to defend it from the living. The code shimmered, beautiful and fleeting, but to record it, Elara needed perfect stillness and concentration, an impossibility with the phantoms gliding toward them. Kalin saw the desperation in her eyes. Without a word, he made his choice. He turned and sprinted away, not in flight, but toward a long colonnade of fallen pillars. Using rocks and the city's own acoustic tricks, he began to create a cacophony of illusory footsteps and shouts, drawing the anger of the spirits away from the bell tower and toward his own hiding place. It was a desperate gamble that placed his safety entirely in Elara's hands. Trusting him with her whole heart, Elara forced herself to ignore the chilling whispers and the retreating sound of Kalen's diversion. She focused only on the luminous sound wave, her hand moving swiftly as she transcribed the intricate, pulsing geometry onto her parchment. The moment the final line was captured, the projection vanished. She called out for Kalin, her voice cutting through the spectral wails. He emerged from the shadows, breathless but unharmed, the phantoms already beginning to fade back into the stones. But they had not escaped unscathed. As the last guardian dissolved, it left a mark upon them both, a faint, shimmering brand on the back of their hands that felt like ice. The curse was a tracker, a beacon that would call their enemies to them as long as it remained. The new code, now in their possession, offered the only hope. It spoke of a purifying spring, a place where water washed away all magical taint. Its location was a name that sent a chill down their spines, a forest where light and shadow warped the senses. Their path to cleansing led into the deceptive heart of the Glimmer wood. The curse on their hands felt like a shard of perpetual winter, a cold reminder that they were being hunted with every step. The Glimmer wood awaited them, a forest where the very light seemed to conspire against reality. Sunbeams did not illuminate here, they twisted, casting multiple, shifting shadows from a single tree. The air hummed with a low, disorienting frequency that made thoughts feel slippery and untrustworthy. The path to the purifying spring was not a trail of dirt and stone, but a gauntlet of the mind. The first illusion struck Kalin as a visceral memory. He saw Elara, her face cold and resolute, calmly handing their collected codes over to a smiling vault guardian, explaining that her mission was complete and his exile was now permanent. The betrayal felt so real, the details so perfect, that a hot spike of anger and despair lanced through him. He almost turned to accuse her, the words forming on his lips, when he felt a sudden, desperate pressure on his hand. Elara, her own eyes wide with a private horror, had seen an illusion of her own, a vision of Kalin lying motionless on the forest floor, his lifeblood seeping into the roots, a consequence of her reckless quest. She had reached for him blindly, her need for confirmation overriding the terrifying image before her, their fingers interlaced, a tangible anchor in a sea of lies. "We are real," Kalin stated, his voice tight but firm, cutting through the deceptive silence. "This forest shows us only fear. We trust what we hold, not what we see." They repeated this ritual with every new assault. The woods showed them towering, monstrous versions of the Shadow Watchers, the complete and utter desolation of their homeland, and even the mocking faces of the elders declaring their entire quest. a foolish children's story. Each time, they tightened their grip, spoke their trust aloud, and walked deliberately forward into the heart of the deception. The mental strain was exhausting, a constant battle to reject a reality their senses screamed was true. But with every illusion they shattered together, their bond solidified from a partnership of convenience into an unbreakable alliance. The forest, finding no purchase in their united front, finally relented. The deceptive light coalesced ahead, forming a single, unwavering beacon that led them to a small, clear spring bubbling up from between silver-veined rocks. The eighth artifact was the spring itself, its pool bed carved with luminous symbols that shimmered through the water. As they plunged their cursed hands into the cool, pure flow, the icy brands dissolved, washing away in a stream of silver light. The sense of being tracked vanished, replaced by a profound and liberating stillness. With clear minds and cleansed spirits, they transcribed the code from the pool's floor. This message spoke of knowledge lost and wisdom guarded. It pointed them toward a place they had both revered, but never thought to question, a repository of all elven history that was now sealed by decree. Their next destination was the heart of their own civilization's forbidden knowledge, the sealed Great Library. The Great Library's obsidian doors were sealed with more than just physical locks. A shimmering field of energy pulsed across the entrance, and the air hummed with the presence of hidden sentinels. Getting inside required more than courage. It required a perfect performance. Under the cover of a moonless night, they put their plan into motion. Elara, using her skill with illusion, wove a phantom disturbance on the library's far side, a convincing image of two figures attempting to scale the outer wall. As the guard's attention snapped toward the decoy, Kalin used his intimate knowledge of the building's original blueprints to locate a forgotten ventilation shaft, hidden behind a curtain of thick ivy. It was a tight, dusty squeeze, but it was their only way in. They moved through the cavernous, silent halls like ghosts, their hearts pounding in time with the measured footsteps of the patrols echoing in the distance. The ninth artifact was not on a pedestal, but covered an entire wall of the restricted section. It was an immense, ancient tapestry, its threads seeming to shift and shimmer even in the still air. As they approached, the woven figures subtly turned their heads to regard them. A soft, collective voice, like the rustling of old pages, filled their minds. It did not offer the code, it demanded a price. Truth. It began to ask questions, its inquiries peeling back the layers of their intent. Why do you seek this power? What future do you truly envision? Kalin hesitated, his mind racing with the political consequences, the risk of exposing their knowledge of the conspiracy. But Elara stepped forward. She did not speak of strategy or of exposing the council. She spoke from the heart, describing the vivid green of the world from her childhood dreams, the sound of laughter in the marketplaces now fallen silent, the profound, aching hope that their land could be whole again. She laid their entire mission bare, their fears and their fragile alliance, trusting the ancient wisdom in the threads. For a long moment, the tapestry was still. Then the fibers began to move with a life of their own, weaving and unweaving at a breathtaking speed. A new, brilliantly complex pattern emerged from the chaos, a living map of interconnected lines and symbols that pulsed with golden light. The ninth code was revealed. They transcribed it quickly, the silence of the library feeling more oppressive with every scratch of Kalen's stylus. Their exit was just as perilous as their entry. The moment Kalen's weight shifted a pressure plate on the windowsill they used for their escape, a silent, magical alarm resonated through the building. No bells rang, but they felt the shift in the air, a sudden, focused attention turning inward toward their location. They dropped into the shadows below just as the library's upper windows blazed with light. That sanctuary of knowledge was now forever closed to them, and their enemies knew they were getting closer to the truth. Running through the darkened streets, the cool night air did nothing to ease the heat of their close call. They had the code, but the tapestry's final image, now burned into their minds, pointed toward a landscape of fire and raw creation. Their path now led into the searing, unpredictable heart of a living volcano. The volcanic heart thrummed beneath their feet, a deep, rhythmic pulse of raw power. Jagged obsidian shards tore at their boots as they climbed, each step sending loose scree skittering into fuming vents. The 10th artifact awaited them in the caldera's center, a disk of polished black glass mounted on a spire of rock, its surface blank and dormant. Kalin immediately saw the problem. The code was not carved upon it. It would only appear as a reflection, a perfect image cast for mere seconds during a specific geyser's eruption. They had to be in exactly the right place at the exact moment the earth spewed its fiery breath. The wait was an agony of heat and anticipation. The ground trembled, promising violence. When the first warning rumble shook the mountain, Kalin moved. He planted his staff, channeling his understanding of elemental forces into a shimmering, dome-shaped barrier of compressed air around them. The spell was a desperate gamble, a theory drawn from old texts, never tested against the full fury of a volcano. Lyra did not question it. Her entire world narrowed to the obsidian mirror and the building pressure in the vent before it. She held a sheet of light-sensitive crystal ready, her body coiled. Then the mountain roared. A pillar of molten rock and superheated gas exploded upward, crashing against Kalen's barrier. The shield held, but the sound was deafening, a physical force that threatened to shatter their concentration. For 3 heartbeats, the lava's glow filled the mirror. A web of brilliant, fiery lines blazed across its surface. The 10th code. Ilara's hand was a blur, pressing the crystal against the glass, searing the reflection into its heart. The moment the image was captured, Kalen's barrier fractured. A wave of blistering heat slammed into them, stealing the air from their lungs. He grabbed her arm, and they fled, scrambling back over the unstable ground as the entire caldera began to convulse. Rivers of fresh lava cracked open around them, forcing them to leap across widening chasms of fire. They escaped the mountain's wrath by seconds, collapsing on a rocky outcrop far below, their clothes smoldering, their lungs burning. Gasping for clean air, they looked at the crystal now cradled in Ilara's soot-stained hands. The code within was perfect, a captured fragment of the Earth's core power. They had 10 of the 22. The halfway point was both a triumph and a terrifying milestone. The path ahead, deciphered from the volcanic script, led down into a world of crushing pressure and silent darkness, to the sunken ruins of an elven city lost beneath the sea. The ocean's surface closed over their heads, a final, shimmering barrier to the world of air and light. The enchanted kelp charms allowed them to breathe, but nothing could fully prepare them for the crushing silence and immense pressure of the deep. Below them lay the Sunken temple, its pearlescent spires encrusted with glowing coral, a ghost of a civilization swallowed by the sea. Their destination was a grand archway woven from living, multi-hued coral, but its surface was blank, offering no clue. Kalin, consulting a waterproof star chart, confirmed their grim reality. The 11th code would only appear as a projection, a phantom script cast when a single beam of moonlight pierced the water at a precise angle during a specific lunar phase. They had arrived with days to wait. In the perpetual twilight of the depths, time became a slippery, oppressive concept. The darkness around them was not empty. Strange, bioluminescent eyes watched from the Inkai, void beyond the temple's glow, and the sonorous, low-frequency calls of large predators vibrated through the water, a constant reminder of their fragility. The environment was profoundly alien, a crushing weight that pressed not just on their bodies, but on their minds. A single mistake, a panicked swim toward the surface, could mean a painful death. Their ability to speak was reduced to hand signals and a series of agreed-upon taps, forcing a level of trust that went beyond words. To survive the wait, they devised a brutal but necessary system. They took shifts, one always watching the moon's slow progression through a fissure in the temple roof, while the other rested in a small, air-filled pocket they had discovered in a ruined chamber. This cycle of vigilance and exhausted sleep was their only anchor. The psychological strain was immense, a battle against the creeping sense of being trapped in a vast, watery tomb. When the night of the alignment finally arrived, the tension was palpable. They hovered before the coral arch, their eyes fixed on the ceiling. A sliver of silvery light pierced the black water, a needle-thin beam that grew steadily until it struck the arch. For one breathtaking minute, the coral flared with internal light, and the 11th code, a complex lattice of shimmering blue, was projected onto the seabed before them. Elara worked with frantic precision, using a piece of treated slate to capture the intricate pattern. The moment the image was secured, the light faded, plunging them back into near-total darkness. Their success was a signal they did not intend to send. On their frantic ascent, a shape uncoiled from the deeper trenches. A giant sea serpent, its scales the color of old blood, shot toward them, its maw a cave of needle-like teeth. They kicked wildly, their charms straining as they dodged its snapping jaws. A powerful flick of its tail sent their supply satchel spinning into the abyss, lost forever. They breached the surface gasping and terrified, clutching the slate but bereft of food and fresh water. Staggering back onto the shore, they found no respite. The hidden coves and forest clearings they had used as sanctuaries were now marked with subtle signs of search parties. A recently broken branch, a footprint in a place no elf would casually walk. Their safe havens were compromised. With the cold salt water still drying on their skin, they looked to the new code for guidance. Its symbols spoke of relentless winds and high, exposed plateaus. Their path now led away from the suffocating depths, toward the open, razor-edged heights of the Stormpeak highlands. The wind on the high plateau was a constant, keening force, sharp enough to scour the stone itself. Perched on a barren ridge stood the 12th artifact, a delicate frame of silver holding a set of crystal chimes that sang a fragmented, discordant tune. The code was not written, but heard, a melody hidden within the mountain's own breath. Tuning the chimes to catch the correct frequencies was a test of exquisite patience. Elara's ears, finely attuned to magical harmonies, identified the subtle shifts in the wind's pitch, while Kalen's steady hands made the microscopic adjustments to the chime's suspensions. They were utterly exposed on that high ledge, a clear silhouette against the sky for any watching eye. Hours bled away in this tense, delicate work. Then the sky darkened. The wind, once a tool, became a weapon as a sudden storm roared over the peaks. Icy rain lashed at them, and the gale threatened to rip the fragile chimes from their frame, destroying their only chance. In that moment of crisis, their roles seamlessly merged. Lyra planted her feet, raising her hands not against the storm, but to weave a pocket of stillness directly around the artifact, a small bubble of calm in the chaos. The effort strained her, the magical shield buckling under the storm's fury. Inside that fragile quiet, Kalin worked with frantic precision, his fingers making the final, critical adjustments as the chimes trembled. A single, perfect chord rang out, cutting through the storm's roar. The sound coalesced into a shimmering pattern of vibrating lines in the air, the 12th code. Elara captured it just as her shield shattered, the full force of the storm slamming into them, driving them to their knees. As they struggled to stand, a flash of movement caught Kalen's eye. Across a distant ridge, a shadow watcher stood, a dark blot against the gray rock. He met their gaze for one terrible second, then raised a curved horn to his lips. No sound audible to them was heard, but a pulse of dark energy shot into the sky, a clear beacon. Elara launched a blast of raw magic, but the scout melted back into the stone, his message already sent. Their location was compromised, and a larger, deadlier force was now closing in. With the storm at their backs and their enemies alerted, they had only one desperate option. The new code pointed to a place of immense primal power, a sanctuary that was also a prison. They raced downward, away from the open sky, toward the sealed lair of a dormant, magical beast where the 13th artifact was kept. The lair was a cavern of living wood and deep, rhythmic breath. The ancient forest guardian slept at its heart, a colossal creature of bark and vine, its power a palpable hum in the still air. The 13th artifact, a softly glowing gem, was set into the beast's forehead like a third eye, pulsing gently with its dreams. Any sudden movement, any misplaced sound, and they would be facing a force of nature they could not hope to defeat. Kalin prepared the tools from Fenn's satchel, his hands unnervingly steady as he measured out a potent sedative paste derived from rare mountain herbs. Elara's role was to apply it, using her magic to guide the vapors directly into the creature's nostrils without triggering its defenses. They moved with the slowness of growing moss, every muscle tense, every breath a calculated risk. As the guardian's breathing deepened into a drugged stupor, Kalin began the delicate work. With surgical precision, he used fine, enchanted probes to loosen the gem from its organic setting, his movements a silent ballet of focus and control. Elara watched the beast's eyelids for the slightest twitch, her own heart hammering a frantic counter rhythm to its slow, sonorous breaths. The gem came free with a final, gentle twist. For a terrifying moment, the guardian let out a low groan, its massive form shifting in its sleep. They froze, not even daring to breathe, waiting for the storm to break. But the creature settled, its sleep holding by the thinnest of threads. They retreated from the lair, as if from a lit fuse, the newly acquired gem clutched tightly in Elara's hand. Outside, under the open sky, they examined their prize. The 13th code shimmered within the crystal, and as Kalin transcribed it alongside the others, a profound realization dawned. The codes were not just a list of instructions, they were connecting, their lines and symbols beginning to trace the outline of a geographical feature on their master map. The ritual site was revealing itself, but their time had just evaporated. The guardian would wake, and its rage would make the lair a beacon of danger. The Shadow Watchers were closing in, and now they had to find the remaining 9 artifacts with the desperate speed of those who know the net is tightening. Every moment of hesitation brought their enemies one step closer to the same destination. The scent of rain on damp earth was a small comfort, a fleeting moment of peace before the old voice called out from the trees. A figure emerged, a face Kalin had not seen since his days in the royal court. It was Terius, his old mentor, his smile warm, but his eyes holding a sharp, unfamiliar calculation. He spoke of admiration for their defiance, of his own secret research into the codes. He claimed he could lead them directly to the remaining artifacts, bypassing months of dangerous travel, in exchange for a place at their side when the power was finally unlocked. The promise was intoxicating, a siren's call of swift victory against the crushing weight of their dwindling time. But Elara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. The timing was too perfect, his knowledge too specific. How had he found them when they had been so careful? Kalin was torn, his old respect for the man warring with the hard-won caution of an exile. This was a test of their judgment, not just of Terius, but of each other. Could Kalin see past his history, and could Elara trust his discernment over her own deep-seated suspicion? They played along for an evening, sharing a carefully constructed story over a small fire, feeding Terius just enough truth to gauge his reactions. His questions were a little too pointed, his interest in their exact route a little too keen. Under the guise of considering his offer, they retreated to a private spot to argue in tense whispers. Kalin wanted to believe in redemption, in the chance that his old friend had truly seen the light. Lyra argued that a shortcut now could lead to a dead end they would never escape. Their trust, forged in fire and darkness, was the one asset they could not afford to gamble. In the end, the shared memory of the Shadow Watcher's blades and the library's silent alarm decided it. They returned to the fire and, with polite but firm finality, declined. They would continue on their own path, trusting the codes they had bled for over the easy promises of a ghost from the past. Terius's smile did not falter, but it became a brittle, cold thing as he faded back into the forest. Days later, from a terrified traveling merchant they had saved from a bog creature, they learned the truth. Terius had been a deep cover agent for years, his primary mission to infiltrate and dismantle any movement seeking to restore the ancient magic. Their camp that night would have been surrounded by watchers before the moon reached its peak. The relief that washed over them was cold, a sobering affirmation of the paranoia that now guided their every step. There were no allies left in the old world, only traps wearing familiar faces. With grim determination, they turned their focus to the next clue, a place where the stone held memories and the very walls could speak. Their journey now led them deep underground, into the silent, watchful heart of the living caves. The caves breathed around them, stone grinding against stone, in a slow, disorienting rhythm. Corridors they had just passed through sealed shut without a sound, while new tunnels yawned open where solid rock had been moments before. The 14th artifact was not a hidden object, but a specific crystal formation growing from the wall somewhere in this living maze. The problem was one of impossible scale. Thousands of glittering clusters protruded from the stone, and only one would reveal the code when struck with a single, perfect resonant frequency. Their only choice was to split up, using a faint, whispered spell to maintain a constant thread of communication in their minds. It was a calculated risk, trading the safety of proximity for the desperate need for speed. Elara moved left, her fingers brushing over cool, smooth crystals, humming fragmented notes and watching for any flicker of light within the stone. Kalin went right, his logical mind trying to discern a pattern in the cave's shifts, tapping each cluster with a small tuning rod and listening for a telltale harmonic. The trial and error was agonizingly slow, and the groaning of moving rock was a constant reminder that their exit could vanish at any moment. A sudden, sharp crack echoed from Elara's direction, followed by her voice in his mind. "I think I found it. This one feels different." He navigated the shifting tunnels toward her, finding her before a large, multifaceted crystal that seemed to pulse with a deep, internal light. Now came the second, more delicate challenge, finding the frequency. Kalin began a systematic scale, his voice steady as he hit each note. Most crystals remained dark and silent, but this one began to hum in sympathy, its light brightening with each attempt. They were getting closer. The cave gave a violent lurch then, the ceiling above them dropping several inches in a shower of dust. They were running out of time. Elara, trusting her intuition over his methodical approach, sang a single, pure, high note. The crystal erupted with light, its internal facets blazing as the 14th code, a stunning three-dimensional lattice, appeared suspended within its heart. Kalin transcribed it in frantic strokes, just as the tunnel behind them collapsed into rubble. Their path was now a dead end. They ran, guided by Kalen's fading memory of the cave's layout, scrambling through newly opened passages as the walls pressed in around them. They burst out into the open air just as the entrance sealed itself forever, collapsing onto the grass, gasping and utterly spent. The magical effort of maintaining their link and forcing the crystal to reveal its secret had drained them completely. As they lay there recovering, the new code laid out between them. A single, clear symbol dominated the pattern. It depicted a narrow, arching pathway that seemed to hang in the air, connected to nothing. The sky bridge. Their path now led to a crossing with no visible support, a test of faith high above the world. The sky bridge was a single, impossibly slender arch of pearlescent stone, spanning a chasm so deep its bottom was lost in mist. The 15th artifact stood at its apex, a delicate, ornate weather vane of silver that spun lazily in the high winds. According to the code, it would cast the shadow they needed only for a few minutes at dawn, and only if the sky was perfectly clear. They waited through the cold, dark hours, watching the stars fade, their bodies tense with the knowledge that their only crossing would be a race against the rising sun. As the first hint of gold touched the eastern horizon, they stepped onto the bridge. It was not a solid path, but a lattice of interlocking stone that felt treacherously thin under their boots. The entire structure groaned and swayed with every movement, a disorienting dance over the endless drop. Elara, lighter and more agile, went first, testing each step, her hands occasionally grazing the stone for balance. Kalin followed close behind, his movements deliberate and steady, his voice a low, constant murmur of reassurance and warning. The wind was their true enemy, a capricious force that threatened to pluck them from the narrow walkway and send them spinning into the void. They had to fight for every inch of progress, leaning into the gale, their focus narrowed to the fragile stone beneath their feet and the distant weather vane. Reaching the center felt like a miracle. Lyra positioned herself, holding a sheet of light-sensitive parchment steady as Kalin called out the shifting angles of the sun. For one breathtaking minute, the weather vane's shadow fell across the sheet, not as a simple silhouette, but as a complex, interlocking pattern of lines, the 15th code. Her hand flew, tracing the shadow with a charcoal stick, just as a sudden gust shook the bridge violently. Kalen's hand shot out, gripping her arm, anchoring her as she completed the final symbol. Their success was instantly shattered by a shout from the far side of the chasm. A patrol of shadow watchers had found them. A bolt of searing, violet magic screamed past Elara's head, scorching the stone where she had just been kneeling. There was no time to celebrate. They turned and fled back across the shuddering bridge as more projectiles rained down around them, cracking the delicate stonework. Elara did not look back. She poured the last of her energy into a concealing mist, a thick, roiling fog that spilled from her hands to envelop the bridge, hiding their retreat. They stumbled onto solid ground, just as a particularly powerful blast shattered a section of the arch behind them, the broken stone tumbling silently into the abyss. Crouched in the cover of the trees, their hearts hammering, they knew the game had changed. The Watchers were no longer just tracking them, they were attacking with lethal intent. The new code, now safely in their possession, shimmered with a different kind of energy. It spoke of a place where magic fell like rain from the sky, a chaotic and beautiful storm of pure potential. Their path now led into the heart of the ever-shifting, unpredictable Aurora fields. The air itself crackled with untamed magic in the Aurora fields. Overhead, the sky was a living canvas of shimmering greens and violets, a chaotic ballet of light that pulsed with a sound like 1,000 distant wind chimes. The 16th artifact, they now understood, was not an object to be found, but a secret waiting to be written in the sky itself. Elara knew what she had to do. Finding a small, moss-covered rise, she sat and closed her eyes, blocking out the distracting beauty. One by one, she began to mentally project the 15 codes they had gathered, holding their intricate geometries in her mind and channeling them upward into the dancing lights. The effort was immense, a silent scream of concentration that made the veins in her temples throb. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the Aurora responded. The chaotic swirls of color stilled, then flowed together like liquid light, weaving a new, impossibly complex pattern of brilliant gold against the deep twilight. The 16th code hung in the heavens for all to see, a silent, spectacular declaration of their quest. It was also a beacon they could not control. From the tree line, the glint of polished armor confirmed their worst fear. A squad of shadow watchers had seen it all, but so had others. A small group of traveling merchants and a family of foragers, drawn by the celestial display, now stared not at the sky, but at Elara and Kaelen with expressions of awe and dawning hope. They had witnessed a miracle, and they understood its source. As the code faded from the sky, a few of these onlookers stepped forward, offering silent nods of solidarity and hastily gathered supplies. It was a fragile, unexpected gain, but it came at a terrible cost. The Watchers were already advancing, their movements swift and coordinated. There was no time for gratitude or explanations. With the new code seared into her memory and a handful of new allies melting back into the landscape to spread the word, Elara and Kaelen fled the glowing fields. The path forward, deciphered from the oral script, led to a domain of absolute stillness, a cold so profound it could freeze time itself. Their flight now pointed toward the endless white of the frozen tundra. Cold was a thief in the frozen tundra, stealing the warmth from their bones and the feeling from their fingers. The 17th artifact was a cruel joke of nature, a single, perfect flower, frozen in a wall of ancient blue ice, its vibrant purple petals suspended in time. To reveal the code, they had to coax it to life, but the glacier around it was a fragile, groaning giant. A single misstep with their magic could send a torrent of meltwater crashing down upon them or plunge them into a hidden crevasse. Kalin immediately went to work, his cartographer's mind analyzing the subtle fractures and pressure lines in the ice. He mapped out a small, stable island around the flower, marking the precise spots where they could stand without risking a collapse. Their plan was a careful dance of shared exhaustion. They took turns, one resting and huddling for warmth, while the other focused a thread of magical heat, no thicker than a needle, onto the frozen blossom. The cold fought them every second, sapping their energy, making the simple act of concentration a monumental effort. Elara's hands trembled as she channeled the warmth, her breath pluming in the frigid air. Then a miracle, a single droplet of water formed on a petal, then another. Slowly, agonizingly, the flower began to uncurl, its petals softening and opening as if greeting a long-lost son. As it reached full bloom, a complex pattern of veins within the petals began to glow with a soft, golden light, revealing the intricate 17th code. Their triumph was a silent, shivering thing, but the sound that followed was not the cracking of ice. It was the soft crunch of snow behind them. They turned to see 3 shadow watchers, their gray cloaks dusted with frost, moving toward them with the silent, fluid grace of predators born of this cold. These were no ordinary patrol. They were specialists, their eyes pale and adapted to the glare, their movements unnervingly steady on the treacherous ice. There was no parley, only the swift, deadly draw of their blades. Elara and Kaelen were exhausted, their magic nearly spent. They fought a desperate, defensive battle, their movements slowed by the cold. Kalin used his staff to deflect a thrust, his boots slipping on the ice. Elara managed to conjure a shield of hardened air, just in time to stop a throwing dagger aimed at his back, the impact shattering her concentration and the shield alike. They were being pushed back toward a deep fissure in the glacier, their situation growing dire. Then, a shout echoed across the ice. From a ridge above, 2 of the merchants they had aided in the Aurora fields appeared, along with a hardy trapper they had met days before. They did not engage the Watchers directly, but they created a perfect distraction. rolling large snow boulders down the slope and shouting to confuse the enemy. That single moment of chaos was all Elara and Kaelen needed. Seizing the opportunity, Elara unleashed a concentrated blast of force, not at the Watchers, but at the ice shelf beneath their feet. The shelf cracked and tilted, sending the ambushers stumbling. Kalin grabbed Elara's arm, and they scrambled away, leaving the disoriented Watchers behind. Victorious but utterly weary, they retreated to a shallow ice cave. As Kalin transcribed the new code, a profound shift occurred. With 17 patterns now laid out together, the map of their journey was almost complete. The ritual site was no longer a mystery, its location clear and undeniable. The end was truly in sight. The final clue in the flowers pattern was unmistakable, pointing toward a place they had already braved and failed to conquer. Their path now led back to the Stormpeak, but this time, the artifact was not a puzzle to be solved. It was a force to be confronted, a power said to be guarded by the wind itself. The storm on the peak was a living entity of wind and ice, a final, furious barrier between them and the end of their journey. Elara and Kaelen stood back to back at the summit, the 21 codes blazing in their minds as the Shadow Watchers and their masters, the corrupt council members, emerged from the Tempest. The council's leader sneered, his hand outstretched not for the artifacts, but for the knowledge within them, a power he believed could be harnessed for control. This was the final, terrible choice the codes had hinted at all along. With a shared glance of absolute understanding, they acted. Kalin and their small band of allies formed a protective circle, their weapons and last reserves of magic creating a shimmering dome against the onslaught of blades and spells. Inside that fragile sanctuary, Elara knelt before the heart of the peak, where the final artifact lay waiting. It was not a crystal or a stone, but a single, dormant seed, gray and lifeless. The codes were not a weapon to be wielded, but an invitation to give, to become part of the renewal. She could feel the council's will pressing against the barrier, a greedy, hungry force that sought to twist this magic into a chain. She could try to fight them, to turn the energy into a blast that would secure her own victory, but that would only continue the cycle of control and decay. In that climactic moment, she remembered the desolate future of her dreams, the silence she had vowed to break. With a final, peaceful breath, she made her choice. She let go of her own life's ambition, her desire for vindication, and poured every ounce of her own energy, her very spirit, into the seed. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then the seed erupted. A trunk of pure, white light shot into the sky, branches of vibrant green exploding outward in a silent, breathtaking wave. The great tree's roots did not dig, they flowed, a river of light cascading down the mountain and across the entire land. Where the light touched, the gray decay dissolved, replaced by a surge of vibrant color and life. The corrupt magic of the council and their watchers simply unraveled before this pure, revitalizing power, their weapons falling from numb hands as the land itself rejected their influence. Lyra had sacrificed the self to save the whole, and in doing so, she became the catalyst that wove the 22 codes back into the world, restoring the harmony that was always meant to be. The healing tree's light did not simply fade, it settled into the world, a permanent warmth in the soil and a new song on the wind. Across the elven lands, the gray decay receded like a bad dream, replaced by a surge of vibrant life. Meadows bloomed with flowers that had not been seen for centuries, and the air itself hummed with a restored, gentle magic. The great tree stood at the heart of it all, its branches a living tapestry of light and leaf, a symbol that harmony had been chosen over control, sacrifice over domination. Elara, though weakened by her ultimate gift, found her strength returning slowly, nourished by the very world she had saved. She was no longer a fugitive, but a hero, her name spoken with reverence and gratitude. Beside her, Kalen's contributions were finally recognized, his exile formally overturned. The meticulous mind that had once charted forgotten lands was now appointed the chief archivist of the renewed realm, tasked with preserving not just the story of the 22 codes, but the wisdom they contain. His redemption was not just in the eyes of his people, but in his own heart, as he found a purpose greater than he had ever dared to hope for. The bond they had forged, tested by fire, darkness, and betrayal, became the foundation of a new era of leadership. Their small band of allies, the merchants and trappers who had stood with them at the end, became the first guardians of this new peace, a testament to the power of cooperation that had overcome a deep and insidious corruption. The 22 ancient codes were never meant to be a weapon or a secret to be hoarded. They were a guide, a profound lesson in stewardship. They taught that true power lies not in dominating the natural world, but in listening to it, in understanding its intricate balances, and giving of oneself to sustain it. The Council's faction, which had sought to control the fading magic, saw its influence dissolve as the land itself rejected their twisted philosophy. New challenges would, of course, arise in time, for no world remains static. But the land and its people were no longer merely surviving, they were thriving, their spirits intertwined with the vibrant magic Elara had restored. With the great tree standing watch, and the codes now woven into the fabric of their culture, Elara and Kaelen looked to the future, not as rulers, but as steadfast guardians, ready for whatever story would unfold.